Today's guest is Kelsey Barton Henry, who is pursuing a doctorate at the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research and is a CEO CFFA. And we're going to be discussing how CEOs should engage with their AI teams. I'm Tony Wood from CEO Collaborative Forum, and let's hear CEO Reflects. Hey, Kelsey, very warm welcome. Thank you so much for making the time today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
Fantastic, and I wanted to do this podcast for a while because we talk a lot to CEOs and with CEOs about you need to look at AI or understand at least the impact of AI on your teams, but we never actually say what might be some of the things that you want to do. How do you even get started? It's similar to, in a lot of situations, people might say, hey, go and get a great senior management team or SMT. And they go, well, that's brilliant, but I've never done that before. So how am I meant to know how to do that? So hopefully you can just give us a little bit of an understanding of how we would do that. So if we start off maybe right at the beginning with, how would you explain to a CEO how to use AI?
Yeah, so I think in perhaps the most general sense, AI is a tool for learning from data to make decisions. There's a lot of different ways that we can learn from data. There's a lot of different data from which we can learn. So that's where things get very complicated. But I think that keeping that in mind as a general overview of what AI does is helpful. So I think specifically for CEOs, this means this AI can work in the areas of like predicting future values of whatever sort of measurable quantity you have, classifying new data that comes in as different types, or so say you have different types of clients and you want to know for a new client what's likely their sort of type, or grouping similar data together. So basically all things that you can do learning from data, AI can sort of automatize and make very good decisions, and often AI makes better decisions than humans because it's able to find very complicated patterns. And I think sort of pattern finding in data is what AI is sort of it's its particular skill. And I think like having that understanding and then going in with an open mind and really saying like, what are my biggest problems, and like what is a moonshot idea that would be really cool if we could do. And then I think sort of getting started is keeping that perspective, bringing those sort of questions, and then just talking to a data scientist and really, or any specialist in AI. There's like a large berth now, and just talking with them about your moonshot ideas, the data you have, and someone who really knows that area, and really collaborating well with them.
So I mean, where and who would CEOs talk to? Because obviously, if they're just starting out in AI, they're not going to have a Kelsey, which means that how do you get to them? How do you get that first conversation? Do people approach you on the street and say, hey, Kelsey, I'd like to know?
Yeah, well, I think two things. I think, like I said, like developing like a list of like wishes or cool stuff that could happen, or just really problems that like concretely that you need, I think is a first step. I think a second step is, before you even talk to a data scientist, is talking to your existing team. Like I said, AI is really based on data, and it's hard for a data scientist to like come in and say, "Oh, like we could solve this problem you have," if they don't know the data that you have. So I would first talk to whoever is on your team, that does know the data that you have, and how it's stored, and what data is maybe possible to get that you might not be getting. So I think that, like, first your work, your team's work, and then I think, yeah, I think in terms of, I think there's a lot of data scientists who are working on a freelance basis or on a consulting basis. I know that like AI consulting is like a whole thing itself. So I think, yeah, then I would just like reach out um, to a data scientist, like on LinkedIn or through your networks. I know that a lot of businesses of many different types are using AI in very different ways, either as a part of their particular product or just to augment their own um, sort of services or offerings. So yeah, I think look in traditional channels like LinkedIn to like hire someone even on a consulting basis, or of course, like talk to your friends and see if they know someone who works in this area who might at least give you a first perspective on what would be good for you to be looking for, because like I said, there's a lot of different specializations inside AI. So it's good to know, like, oh, I'm looking for someone who works with text data or who works with time series
Right.
data.
Got it. What would that? So imagine that someone says, so they've listened to this podcast and they've gone, my goodness, yes, I know I need to do it. I know I've heard it everywhere, but I actually want to know what to do. What would that first 90 days from saying, I've listened to Kelsey on the podcast, I'm now coming back and I'm going to do something. What would those first 90 days be?
Yeah, so I think those first 90 days, I think, so say that we've managed to like find a consultant, or we've hired someone, or we're having even like a test run. I think the principal, like, defining factor of a good relationship, hopefully, with a data scientist for a CEO would be hallmarked by two things: really, exchange and exploration. So
Right.
I think exchange is really important because in this case, the CEO and the data scientist, or also along with your team, if you have a bigger team, are really working at understanding each other. So first, the data scientist is trying to understand your problems. I think sometimes there's a communication barrier between data scientist language and more business language. So I think communication is really important, and this helps like the data scientist to understand what is the problem that you have as a CEO, or what's the moonshot idea that you would like to execute, and understanding also how that can be done with the data that you have available. So like I said before, it's important to know what data you have and how it's stored. And so I think the data scientist understanding the scope of the problem is really important. But then reciprocally, also the data scientist communicating to the CEO what are those possible solutions that you can do with AI. So what's possible with the data you have, what's possible with the data that you could get, and what's possible with like the AI sort of availability. Is like, I know right now AI seems like magic in so many ways, but there's a lot of background and of course a lot of data that go into that. So I think that's sort of good. Exchange is really important between a data scientist and a CEO. And I think, and the other thing I said was exploration.
Right.
Sort of, I think at first, especially when you have a new data set or you have a new company that you're working with, I think it's really important to create some prototypes, some proof of concepts. So basically,
Interesting.
for the data scientists to see if the data is sufficient, or how the data can be obtained and managed. So I think I would definitely expect within those first 90 days that sort of smaller scale projects be sort of executed as a sort of proof of concept, or a demonstrable
Interesting.
of
Okay.
like, this is a path we could go down. So I think it's partially communication and understanding, just by talking to the data scientists and understanding their expertise, but also sort of, I would expect that sort of small projects, small, yeah, like sort of proof of concepts would be really helpful.
Right. So in that first stage, if I understood correctly, we're going to start off. We're going to find someone. So we got to have a reasonable budget because we're going to find someone. Once we've found someone, we're then going to look at our existing data, find out where it is in our team. We're then going to get that information to the data scientists. They're then going to explore it and give us some feedback back and forth because it's a conversation, right?
Yeah.
And then after we've had that conversation, we're then going to say, right, suggest some mini projects that we could do to gain some value, and then
Mhm.
we're going to go ahead and do them. Do you think that's possible in 90?
I think so. I think it's also, I mean, it depends very, very much. That it depends on the scale of your data. It depends on the type of AI you want to implement, if it's just a prediction, if it's a classification, or if you want to create a chatbot, like there's different levels of of difficulty. Um, but yeah, so I think it's possible, and like I said, a lot of data scientists do sort of consulting. So if you also just want to start the conversation, it doesn't have to go so far as to having some mini projects. But I think it's possible. I mean, I think it also depends on like how your data is stored, how well your data is stored.
Really, like what you're saying is you're wanting a fully rounded person who has technical skills, has data skills, has empathy, has great communication skills, because a lot of this is going to be communication. And I think that's very different from a lot of the older definitions that people had from a technical point of view. And I think that the more rounded individual is going to really flourish in this. Do you think that's true?
I think so. I think especially right now, and partly I'm coming at this as from a like for CEOs who have never implemented AI or like don't sort of
Yeah.
want a more general overview. So this is also why I would recommend like a generalist, like sort of practitioner. But
Mhm.
I do think think that's really important, and I think that like obviously you have to have great technical skills as a data scientist. You have to have great mathematical skills. But I think as sort of we've been sort of, and also that I've seen this in my own career as AI has gotten more and more implemented. Under like
Mhm.
a lot of times, there's a communication breakdown between this is what we want, or this is from our C level, or this is feedback from our clients, and like talking to a tech team. And
Yeah.
I think there are definitely some companies who have like people who are basically translators between the tech team and or the data team and basically everybody else. um, and so I think that if you can find someone, especially if you're implementing on a small scale,
Right.
yeah. So, and I think this was a big thing that I was thinking that like if you're gonna hire like one or two data scientists, you have to be able to like communicate with them and them with you in a way that you can both understand, because you don't have the luxury of having a data team interpreter if you're starting on a small scale.
So, look, that's really interesting. Is there any one final word of wisdom, Kelsey, that you would give our CEOs?
Um, I don't know. I think be open-minded. I think open-minded
Mhm.
in many ways, meaning if I think it's always great when a CEO comes and said, I think this would be a really cool thing that we can do. Like, I'm not sure it's possible. Like, I'm not sure like
Yeah.
if we have the data, like that's really exciting for a data scientist to hear, sort of this moonshot idea. But I also think reciprocally, like hearing, okay, we don't have the data for that, or like honestly I think it's a better question for something that's not AI or a different AI tool. I think that type of open-mindedness is also really helpful. And yeah, I think so open-mindedness, sort of this level of organization that is like these are the data we have or we don't have. And honestly, like you don't have to do this yourself. Like someone on your team
There's the
probably
weekend's gone.
yeah, I mean, like someone on your team probably knows where your data is and how it is. So
Yeah.
yeah, like work collaboratively with the people on your team who know those answers to the like concrete technical questions that a data scientist will have. And yeah, as always, just really keep ethics in mind, and hire people who also have ethics in mind.
So, Kelsey, look, thank you so much for your time today. I found it incredibly interesting. We could continue on for a long time, but sadly, we have to stop it there. I know there's going to be lots of comments and questions. If there are, would you be willing to come back on a future episode to answer some of those?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And no, really,
Awesome.
thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a really interesting discussion, and of course, AI is just really all the rage right now. So it's interesting also for me to think about these questions, as I've seen AI progress. So yeah, thank you very much for having me.